when you've had a lot of chronic stress in your life, your nervous system essentially becomes weaker and weaker. What also happens is the nervous system kind of stops interpreting threats or dangers or stress properly, which then leaves you more vulnerable to it.
Welcome to Beyond Diagnosis, a podcast to raise your awareness, decisions, and voice for alternative practices so you can take back control of your health. I'm Rita Michele, your host, a mindset and empowerment coach, and the founder of the ONUS platform. Join me each week so you can create the health of your dreams. Today's guest is Danielle Rubio, a nervous system expert, and this is what I know about Danielle. When women want to ditch anxiety, depletion, and chronic stress for good, they come to her to rewire the blueprint of who they are, their nervous system, to reclaim a healthy and vibrant life. Hi, Danielle, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, look, it's a pleasure. And wow, nervous system really encompasses so much, doesn't it? So, as a nervous system expert, you're also a somatic trauma coach and a mindfulness guide. So, in your opinion, what is nervous system regulation and what does it mean when someone's nervous system is dysregulated?
Uh-huh. Yeah, so again, your nervous system is essentially the software system of you, and your nervous system has evolved over millions of years with its main responsibility of keeping you alive. So the nervous system is constantly assessing, sensing, perceiving the environment for danger, for threats. And essentially, a regulated nervous system is a nervous system that will become activated. So if there's a stressor coming in, the nervous system will go into a fight or a flight or a freeze as a response to the threat or the danger. But then once that danger's gone, a regulated nervous system will then automatically, because in my work, we're working specifically with the autonomic nervous system, which is it's automatic, everything's happening automatically. The nervous system will automatically go back to rest and digest, or we might also call it socially engaged, this harmonious place of the nervous system. And so a dysregulated nervous system is one where that's not really happening. So the nervous system is basically getting stuck in a fight or a flight or a freeze state.
Right. And there's a lot of talk about that, especially, people chronically stressed from work or they're chronically stressed with family and work, etc. And this is where a lot of, the new modalities are coming out, breath work, all that sort of thing. But what my listeners would like to know is what are some of the physical, mental, emotional symptoms that someone can experience to identify that they have a dysregulated nervous system?
Yeah, so I always there was this great meme that was going around that always pops into my head when I get this question, and the meme was, I had 99 problems and regulating my nervous system solved 98 of them. So because the nervous system, it's essentially the software system of you. So your brain and your nervous system are constantly in communication, but 80% of that communication is going nervous system up. And so your nervous system is literally informing your physiology, your biology. It's governing your endocrine system. So it's controlling a whole lot about you. And from infancy, from birth, essentially, your nervous system was sending these messages to your brain to interpret how to keep you safe. And thus, that's essentially how your personality was formed, is your brain getting all of this information from the nervous system. So when the nervous system is dysregulated, stuck, we could say, all sorts of a myriad of issues will arise from this. So you might find that you're anxious a
Mm.
lot of the time. So people who are having a lot of anxiety, they most definitely have a dysregulated nervous system. Um, if you have a lot of chronic ailments, like you're getting repeated headaches, you have a lot of chronic pain, you have these sort of like unexplained um, physical pains or annoyances, and even like the eye twitches that happen, we can root that to a dysregulated nervous system. Um, and essentially, with that, we could say there's trapped survival stress in the body that needs to be released. And so this is where that somatic, the body oriented work comes in, because until that stress is released, it's going to continue to cause havoc for people emotionally, physically, mentally. Some other symptoms people might have, they are chronically angry people. They have a lot of that fight nervous system energy in their system. Um, so it's a pretty like wide spectrum of the symptoms. Somebody who's chronically stressed all the time. So a lot of my clients that come to me, um, they come to me, and a lot of them are saying like, I just feel like life's hard all the time. I feel like I'm chronically stressed all the time. I'm always anxious. I feel like I'm burnt out. I don't have any control over my emotions. I feel like I'm constantly at the mercy of my triggers, and I'm constantly, hot tempered, or I'm constantly shutting down. That's what we see with people that have a lot of that freeze nervous system energy. So there's a lot of wide symptoms that can come up when the nervous system is dysregulated.
I love that. What I find really interesting about that is that you spoke of it the other way around. I think a lot of people, including myself, would have thought, well, the brain is informing the nervous system, because everyone talks about the brain is the master. And I would have thought that the brain informed the nervous system. So if we're anxious, our nervous system's going to be anxious, we're going to be doing, but you're saying it's the other way around. It's our
Yes.
nervous system that's informing our brain. That,
Yes. So yeah. So like an interesting kind of analogy or way to think about it that I give my students is, say there's a bear. You come across a bear in the wild. Um, did you run from the bear because you were scared, or are you scared because you ran from the bear? Most people would think that it's you run from the bear because you're scared, but it's actually you're scared because you ran from the bear. So the physical automatic reaction is first. The way that your brain interprets the information is second, but it's all happening so fast in a situation like that where there's like, a very big danger. But yeah, like I said, 80% of that communication is going nervous system up. And of course, the brain is interpreting things, and then of course informing, the nervous system as well. But most of that's coming from the nervous system. And it's very, again, it's automatic. It's very I say like the nervous system is your perceiver and the brain is the analyzer. And what's happening first is that perception of danger. And for the millions of years that your nervous system has evolved, and it's been evolving far longer than your higher brain has,
mm,
our main stressors were predator, prey, territorial fights, and only in this very tiny sliver of human evolution have our stresses been what they are today. But the nervous system has not changed. And so the nervous system is interpreting things like your boss screaming at you, or being in constant stress with having 4 little ones at the house, or being in a toxic relationship. Your nervous system is perceiving that as danger.
yeah. I wrote down 2 points here that I wanted to bring up before we move on to anything else. One is you talked about the autonomic nervous system. Does that encompass the vagus nerve?
Yes.
Because I hear a lot about the vagus nerve, especially for people who have digestive issues.
Mhm.
So it's all intertwined. You can't separate it. So whatever you're feeling affects the vagus nerve, and then that's going to, for people who are struggling with digestive, bloating, IBS, I assume it's all interrelated.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. 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 So your vagus nerve is running, from the brainstem essentially down to the colon. And your vagus nerve is uh, the main nerve that is essentially responsible for helping to bring you from fight or flight into a place of rest and digest, to a place of, you know,
Mm,
easygoing social engagement branch of the nervous system. And if you have a lot of chronic stress, or you've had a lot of trauma, or even any trauma, um, the vagus nerve becomes weak. Yeah.
right.
And the vagus nerve has these branches branching from it. So it's nicknamed the wandering nerve. So it has these branches going all throughout your body. And of course, it's very connected to the digestive system. Your
Mm,
nervous system governs your digestive system. So this is, coming back to that meme, I healed my nervous system and I solved 98 of my problems, because a lot of our digestive stuff is psychosomatic.
yes. That would be very interesting to many of the listeners today. And also, I wanted to touch on, for people who don't know, what is somatic therapy? Just
Mhm.
a quick touch on that to explain.
Yeah, so somatic, comes from the word soma, which is a Greek word that means the body. So it's
Mm,
essentially body-based, body-oriented therapy. So we're using um, bottom-up approaches, which essentially we're using the body. So we're using movement, we're using sound, we're using, um, somatic inquiry. So dropping into the body, rather than things that would be top down, like talk therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy, or even affirmations, or even tapping, where you're using that higher brain to try and fix something, when really we want to go at it by way of the body, because that's giving us the greater access to the nervous system.
great. So let's talk about the science of chronic stress and its long-term impact on the nervous system.
Yeah, so it's kind of like uh, a bit of like a chicken and the egg, or a loop, because
Mm,
essentially, if you had, for example, a lot of adverse experiences as a child, or you had trauma, and essentially, that could be anything from surgeries or accidents, or it could be, more serious types of trauma, or it could be a lot of little cuts. Maybe there was a lot of neglect in the family. Um, your nervous system is going to basically lose its strength and lose its capacity to handle stress. It's kind of like the nervous system becomes weaker, and that software system isn't functioning properly. So you're not going to be able to handle future stress very well. So then at that point, minor stresses are going to seem much bigger for you. Um,
mm. You touched on trauma. Now, trauma runs, depending on the type of trauma someone has experienced, whether it's emotional trauma or trauma from a car accident, whatever it does. I think everybody knows how that can affect your nervous system. So I'm really curious to explore this long-term unresolved trauma, the impact it's having on your nervous system daily. And if you can give us an example for our viewers and our listeners, so they can paint a picture in their mind, that when you talk about the somatic therapies and using our body as opposed to our mind, because a lot of people go and see a psychologist, or, um, you know, a talk therapist, for their trauma, you're saying bring it from the body. So what do you do physically in these sessions to help people who have this very deep seated trauma?
yeah. Yeah. So, I like, to tell a lot of the people that I work with or who are interested in my programs, trauma is a fact of life. Everybody has some degree of trauma because trauma, at least in the somatic field, how we define trauma is
Mm,
anything that overwhelmed your nervous system. So it's not so much about the event, it's how your nervous system responded to that event.
mm,
So two people could have the same exact event happen to them, say a car accident. One person comes out without trauma, one person does. So what was the difference there? Well, the person who did come out with trauma likely already had some underlying trauma in their system that hadn't been dealt with, and this bigger accident tipped them over the edge. So then their nervous system became completely dysregulated. It doesn't have capacity anymore, and there they are in the throes of PTSD and everything that comes as a result of it. So everybody has trauma, and trauma is essentially what created the nervous system to become dysregulated. And oftentimes the brain will suppress those traumatic events. It's going to push these back into the recesses of your mind so you can keep on keeping on. So it's not a bad thing necessarily that your brain does this, but this is why things like talk therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy or things that are top-down approaches are not greatly effective for dealing
mm.
with trauma because you don't even really have access. However, the body is never going to forget. So this is why there's that famous saying that's been going around for a bit now that the body keeps the score, because
Mhm.
the body it's not, it can't suppress it. So your body will express it in ways like anxiety, depression, chronic anger, being completely emotionally irregulated. Emotions are physical. So your body is going to constantly try to find this homeostasis. It wants to release that stored survival stress. It wants to release that energy essentially of those times that uh, you got stuck, or times that your nervous system was in a fight or flight. But if you're like a 5-year-old going into surgery and they put you under anesthesia, you can't feel the pain, but it didn't shut off your nervous system. So your nervous system is still sensing, I'm being cut open. This is like high fight or flight, and then you're going to shut down into freeze because there's nothing the nervous system could do about that, right? You're under anesthesia. You can't fight. You can't flee. So all these things, start piling up, and they're stuck in the body essentially. So when we use body-oriented practices and exercises, tools, the beautiful thing is that we don't have to remember every single thing that happened. We don't have to analyze it. We don't have to endlessly talk about it. We can use body-oriented practices essentially to move this stuff out, moving it out of the system.
And what are some of those exercises so someone can understand?
Yeah. So one thing that for example, of tonifying the vagus nerve, we want that nerve to be strengthened again.
Mm,
Things like singing, things like humming. There's this really magical sound that Peter Levine, who's a huge pioneer in somatic experiencing, he created somatic experiencing, but a pioneer in trauma therapy. It's this boo sound that sounds like boo. And they found that this helps to tonify that vagus nerve. So you're using your body, you're using your voice to get access in there and strengthen the nerve. Other things like dancing, or one is going to create these new neural pathways, because at the root of this work, essentially, we're rewiring the nervous system. We're creating new mirror neurons and new neural pathways. So dancing, Dancing is also going to be a great release. One of the biggest things I give clients who work with me is simply feeling again. So we have become chronically, sadly, in this place where we are talking heads and we're completely disconnected from our bodies, and we need to feel. You have to feel it to heal it. So the way that we release trapped emotions, for example, is we need to feel them. There's no bad emotion. And we keep treating certain emotions like they're bad, or I have this anger, so I'm going to go try to take it away with meditation, or I'm going to go try to take this away by, calling up a friend, when really it just needs to be felt.
That's an interesting, and I do agree with you there. Like, we have such a disconnect between the head and body. You speak to a lot of people, and it's all, I'm going to think my way through this. I'm going to analyze my, what's, the research on this or whatever, instead of actually going, there seems, why is it, do you think, in your profession and from the people the clients that you've seen, what do you think it is that's stopping them from going down into their body? Is it they're scared to feel? Is it is it to acknowledge?
Yeah.
What is it that's keeping them from going?
Well, we're in a culture that doesn't feel. So we're taught from birth essentially to negate our felt experience and to not and to become disconnected from our body. So, it's even things like when you're a little one and you're crying and you're told stop crying, or even, you get hurt when you're a little one and you're crying and you're immediately told like, shh, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay.
That's so
you're
true.
you're being gaslit. Your parents don't know any better, because this is just, what I say is there's nobody is to blame and everybody is to blame at the same time. And so
Mm,
we've just
mm.
essentially passed these ways that we call normal. I love Gabor Mate's recent book, The Myth of Normal.
He's
He's
great.
another pioneer, yes, in the trauma field. And uh, these ways that we are with our children, with our babies, that are not healthy, but we take it as it's normal, constantly in all these very subtle ways or very extreme ways of basically not allowing our children to have their voice, or not allowing our children to express their emotions. They're interpreting this, they're getting that message that to feel is wrong. At the very root of that is that, like, my emotions are bad, or being too emotional, expressing my emotions is not okay. And so we really internalize that at a very like subconscious level that starts to dictate, how we are with our emotions. And then, if somebody has had trauma, and they haven't been taught how to emotionally regulate, or they've been taught that their emotions are wrong, the body becomes an unsafe place to be. And people don't want to feel, because they then have this fear that if they feel that pain or that emotion is going to completely swallow them.
Mm. You can see that, and I can now see why a lot of the traditional medicine and psychology practices are just missing the point. Like, they're just staying from shoulder up. You do have some who are very, broader and wider and encompass a few more practices like yourself, but just as years, and that's where you get so many people. I've been in talk therapy for 10, 15 years because we're not going down into the body, and you have to feel it. You have to feel it to heal it, I suppose, in a way.
Yeah.
When someone does these somatic practices with you and they get into their body and they can feel it releasing, is this a permanent thing for their nervous system, or do they have to continuously fine tune because that's the way they are?
You know, it becomes a lifestyle change. So you start to completely relate to yourself and others and the world around you very differently. So it's kind of like, I tell the women in my program, like if you were wanting to lose weight, you wouldn't go into a program for 15 days and eat really healthy and exercise, and then after that 15 days stop and think that you're going to keep the weight off. So
Mm.
you have to keep creating these new neural pathways, and you have to keep establishing a different relationship with yourself where you're connected to your body, where you're allowing the emotions, where you can actually, really be with yourself, and not try, because it's we have been so conditioned for our entire lives until you might be lucky enough to come across a work like this of not feeling ourselves. So, it's going to take some diligence to go in the other direction, and really, because the mind is so clever and it's so tricky, and you might find like you start to get in there and you end up sabotaging yourself, or you end up,
Mm.
you so quickly want to like reach for that piece of chocolate cake or that cocktail or whatever it is to numb it out and not feel. So you have to stay diligent and committed with this new relationship with yourself and these new practices.
Yeah, I love that. It really is sort of repatterning and just kind of being coming back and being a parent to yourself again, like looking after yourself, nurturing yourself. So, what is one action that someone can do, our listeners can do today to help them get back into their body? If they feel they're too much in their head, what can they do today at home? Simple first step to get back into their body.
Yeah, yeah. So I would say the first step, because, I don't know who will end up listening to this and what their past trauma or experiences. I would say the first step in general for everyone is listen to your body. So, as simple as when you have to pee, pee. When you're hungry, eat. When you're thirsty, drink. When you're tired, sleep. So we've also become chronically used to ignoring the body's needs, and we just override these things, and it's bringing out, we have to come back to honoring the body and
Mm,
honoring the ways that your body is trying to communicate. Because if you can start doing things as simple as go to the bathroom when you need to go to the bathroom, eat when you need to eat, it's it's going to start compounding, where it's going to be easier and easier for you when you have that big sadness come up, where you're going to actually be able to listen to your body when it's experiencing it.
perfect. What great advice. So, for people who are experiencing, stress, a frazzled nervous system, chronic headaches, anxiety, maybe they're experiencing a bit of ADHD. There are so many digestive issues. They can feel tingling in their nervous system. These are all those types of symptoms that come from a dysregulated nervous system. How can people work with you? How do they find you, Daddy?
Yeah, so I offer a big one-to-one 6-week program, which is usually
Mm,
where I have people start. I really believe this work has to be one-to-one, because everybody's walked very different lives and everybody has very different nervous systems. And you wouldn't necessarily work with somebody who's stuck in freeze in the same way you would work with somebody that's stuck in a fight or a flight. Um, and so I also have workshops. I also offer retreats. So the easiest way is follow my Instagram, which is I am Danielle Rubio. And there you can find the links to all the ways to work with me.
lovely. And for anyone who wants instant access, all of Danielle's details will be in the show notes. So please go there. And really, if you are struggling with a dysregulated nervous system, Danielle's your girl. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your wisdom.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you. I would love to know, what was the biggest insight or aha moment you got from this interview, so you can now speak up, take action, and make informed decisions for your health. And if you like this episode, get instant access to your free ebook, Alternative Wisdom, Taking Back Control of Your Health, at life-onus.com.